I would say being neurodivergent is just a different way of communicating. That's all it is. When you are a candidate, the only way you can make a decision on a company is from that candidate experience. And the better it is, the better your talent gets. A really great tip for anyone looking for a job is to find a job-seeking buddy, someone who is in the same situation, maybe looking for any type of role, whatever it is, and support each other, like meet each other for coffee, share war stories. That is great for your mental health and feeling better about yourself, because at that point, you think you're the only person who's been rejected for a role ever.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Leaders Series. We've got Owen Murray with us today. He is the founder and CEO of a business called URhired, which is based in Dublin. And they work on increasing and improving the paths for job seekers who potentially have neurodivergent Cs to find jobs, and also to work with companies to promote and develop structures that help those types of people find jobs as well. We've been working with them now for the last 3 months and seen some great success. So we thought it would be great to speak to Owen to find out more about his business, more about his journey, how he comes to do this, and why it's such an important thing for business and for enterprise and for the community. So without further ado, here's Owen. Owen, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you, David?
I'm very well, yes, I'm very well today. The sun is shining, finally.
It is. It's a rarity in Dublin that the sun is shining.
That's right,
so
yeah.
I'm getting as much vitamin D as I can.
It's been very much a rarity over the last 6 months, hasn't it? So yeah, both in London and in Dublin, if you know what I mean. But it's great to have you here, Owen. Obviously, Owen is the founder of URhired. It's a company that GCS, particularly in Ireland, is partnering with a lot and rolling out their services to our clients. And we felt it'd be great to have you on board to talk us through what URhired does and how you come to be here and taking this very important kind of role within the community and within staffing. So it's great to have you on board, Owen. So do you just want to tell us a little bit about URhired, the business itself, and then I think how you come to feel it's important to do this, and how you come to kind of set this up and be I think you just discussed it as a kind of solopreneur within this industry, kind of carrying the fight out to the world.
Absolutely, yeah. So I suppose my background, I was 13 years in recruitment. I worked in London for 6 years as an agency recruiter. Kind of learned my trade there. I had a sales background before that. Love living in London, and then myself and my then girlfriend moved back to Ireland, and I wanted to be closer to the business from a recruitment perspective. So I went and secured an in-house role at Accenture. I then moved on to Facebook, then on to LinkedIn, to TikTok, and then finally HP. So you can see the common trend of tech in my background. I was made redundant 3 times in those 13 years. So I have a lot of empathy for anyone who is out on the job market and looking for a job, and the anxiety that creates. I suffer from severe anxiety myself, and that was one of the reasons why I set up the business. So the final time I was made redundant, kind of said to myself, right, well, I don't want to put my mental health through that again, and also my family. So I decided to set up URhired, and I kind of said to myself, how can I use 13 years experience in recruitment and put it into a business and help job seekers find a job. So I set up URhired for those reasons. I specifically help neurodivergent job seekers find work, because I suppose my experience in recruitment for 13 years, I noticed that the job interview is not set up for neurodivergent individuals, and it's quite challenging anyway if you're not neurodivergent. But things like eye contact, body language, all these quintessential skills that you need to have in an interview can be quite difficult for someone who's neurodivergent. So that's I suppose my niche, and I didn't want to just set up a general job seeking platform. And originally it started off as a consultancy, and I worked directly with neurodivergent job seekers on a one-to-one basis. And then as the business sort of matured, I decided to put everything I know online. And it's now an e-learning platform. So we've actually got two platforms now. So one platform is called Neurodiverse Interview Success, which is every tool in the box a neurodivergent job seeker needs to go from application to day one of their new job. There's also an AI element to it. So at the end of the training, the user will get to interview with a AI agent that is trained on the platform, and they do a mock interview with that AI agent, and the AI agent then gives them feedback. And the idea is to build their confidence before they actually go into interview. So that's one side of the business. The other side of the business, we also have a platform called Talent Spectrum, which is a platform, an e-learning platform that businesses use to make more inclusive hires. So that's everything from looking at the job spec and the language that you use on the job spec to attract neurodivergent employees, and from the questions to ask the candidate in interview. And then there's also an AI element to it as well, where the AI agent is the candidate and the hiring manager is the hiring manager, and the hiring manager then gets feedback on how their interview skills. So I suppose it takes care of the interview process on both sides of the interview process, the job seeker and also the hiring manager as well. And one of the reasons why I set up the Talent Spectrum also was, I asked a lot of hiring managers in my career, what would you do if someone in an interview process was to divulge that they were neurodivergent in some way? And, upwards of 90% of them said they wouldn't know what to do because they didn't understand neurodiversity, and essentially they would exit them from the process. So I'm trying to help those neurodivergent candidates who are highly skilled. There's a horrible statistic that 85% of the neurodivergent community in the UK and Ireland are unemployed, and 40% globally. And I want to tap into that talent and make sure that just because you're neurodivergent doesn't mean you don't deserve a job that you deserve. So I get great satisfaction in my job, David. I love running a business. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, apart from raising two kids. But I love it, and the satisfaction I get from my job, the best satisfaction I get is when I see someone's LinkedIn profile change, and they've got a new position at a company they've always wanted, and I get great satisfaction out of that. So so that's kind of it in a nutshell. And that's
And
what we
it's
do.
obviously, expanding globally. You're starting to do kind of work in the US, I know in the UK as well, working with different partners. I guess a kind of couple of questions that kind of come off this, because it's a topic that we've spoken about a lot on the Leaders Series in terms of, increasing the diversity of workers within the technology industry. My first question, I guess, is do you primarily focus in and around the technology industry, or are you pretty sector agnostic?
No, so the latter, yeah. So like it talks to any the training and the platform talks to any industry, any
Sure.
skill set, any level, all the way from your first job out of university, or even an internship in university, right up to CEO level.
Right,
So
okay.
the users on the platform at the moment, they vary in levels, and it can be anything from a student. So we've started to kind of open the door to US universities as well, where we university work with us directly. We offer them the platform, and then they offer the platform to their students who are neurodiverse. And it doesn't just help them then, at the most important part of their career. It helps them throughout their career. So that's how it's done. It talks to any industry, including tech.
So, the first question I guess I've got, because you obviously work within the recruitment industry, and I've spoken a lot about the kind of the whole matching element and finding the perfect candidate quite a lot in some of these. So what is the difference, therefore, of being a senior leader within a recruitment business, that is very much focused on finding those perfect matches. And when I say perfect match, I don't want you to take it in the way as, well, they're all perfect matches, but you know what I mean, right? So you get a job spec and you're trying to match every single thing, because in essence, that is what you're getting paid to do, right? You're getting paid X thousands of pounds or euros or whatever to find the perfect match. When you're coming into this industry, I guess what you're trying to do is to propose to people that they don't necessarily have to have the perfect match. I mean, I guess that's the initial or the perfect match can be a number of different types of matches. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I think you're kind of touching on diversity of thought there, maybe within a team. So the teams that I led over my career, the more successful ones were the ones that weren't the same person over and over 10 times, right? Um, and I think when you are hiring, you really need to have an open mind when it comes to, right, well, I have these skill sets on my team. I have these types of personalities, who would sort of complement those skills. Um, and, that's where the interview process is so important, to make sure that you're asking the right questions. And, I suppose we could talk hours about sort of unconscious bias, but like going into that interview with those questions and not sort of making decision because before you go into the interview based on where the person went to school or a company that they worked at that you worked at or whatever it is. So, I suppose I've sat with hiring managers over the years and I've listened to these conversations of, hiring managers almost making a decision before they've even met the candidate. Uh, it really is, yeah. And then, like, the conversation at the end of the process at offer stage is totally different. It's like, wow, David really, uh, David, the candidate that I didn't think was going to be great, actually turned out to be brilliant. They complement all the skills on my team, and that's how you build a successful team. But like, I've seen as well where hiring managers have come into companies and they're interviewing potential members of their team 1 or 2 days into their tenure at that business. Like that just doesn't work, right? So you're putting a hiring manager in front of a candidate and expecting them to sell the business, for example, and to ask the right questions and understand the culture. But how could that hiring manager know that if they're only 2 or 3 days in the business? I saw that happen a lot, and that's why I always push that when a hiring manager joins a business, that they have some sort of onboarding process, especially when it comes to recruitment. So yeah, so that's what I think. Does that answer that?
No, it's perfect. And I think to go back to it, when you're speaking to clients, you mentioned there before about kind of the stigma that people have, in terms of this. So how do you overcome that stigma? I think what I'm trying to say is, do you play, or there's a number of different, you mentioned toolkits as well. You could play on, this is good for the community, good for diverse thought, or if you expand your world of looking, then you'll probably be able to get a wider range of candidates. What's your
Yeah.
usual tactic to overcome this stigma, to overcome people's reticence?
I think it starts with how you attract, people to your business, David. So, and that starts with the job spec, right? So if I was to jump on LinkedIn now and go on to a particular company, most of the time it's this sort of generic language used, and there's no thought really put into the job spec. So, when someone who is neurodivergent reads a job spec, if they see language like, that the business, for example, has quiet areas, if you want to go to a quiet area, that they make, you know, that they have during the interview process, if they want maybe a quiet room during the interview process, accommodations is the word I'm looking for, during that interview process. That's the type of language that attracts really great talent. And not many companies are doing that. Now, that's what Talent Spectrum does. It helps with that, and it sort of peels right back the interview process from the beginning, to tailor your interview process around attracting that neurodivergent talent. Um, and to be honest, like, I get this question quite a bit from anyone who's neurodivergent, that deals going to an interview, should they actually divulge that they're neurodivergent, because they believe that will be something that will come across quite negative. And they're not wrong, because there is that stigma, as you were saying, around neurodivergence. And I would say being neurodivergent is just a different way of communicating. That's all it is. So, I always say to anyone who asks me that, and I was in another podcast, I was asked the same question by someone with ADHD. And my answer to that is, it's a very personal choice, if you want to divulge that. But if you do, I would suggest that you do it after the offer is made, because the offer, sometimes the power shifts a bit more to the candidate then, because the company want the candidate, and then you can sort of divulge it then. But it's quite sad to see, because I was even talking to a guy the other day, and he was saying, he reached out to me for support, and he was saying that he's terrified to actually share that he has ADHD with his manager, because he feels that he'd probably be let go, and was let go before. Uh, he doesn't know if it was that was the reason, but he thinks that. Yeah, it's very challenging for anyone going through that. And yeah, I always say just to divulge it after the interview or the offer is made.
Yeah. So you spoke there about obviously the two sides of your business, obviously working with companies, but also working with candidates. And we obviously spoke about reticence and waste side, but I'm assuming that, you know, the act of job seeking must be so stressful for people that suffer from this. So when you first start speaking to them, you talked about taking on the journey. We're so proud that you've gotten the job at the end. When you first start speaking to them, you mentioned a toolkit. So what are the things that they can use to help them to have a successful outcome of a job search?
Yeah, so like the training is the platform is very specific to someone who's neurodivergent. I've sat in rooms of job seekers who are neurodivergent, and listened to all their pain points, and put it into the platform, right? So for example, like, I get this myself. Imposter syndrome tends to be something that does come up quite a bit, during an interview process. And one of the videos is kind of talking about that openly, and talking about the endless requirements trap, etc., and how to get over those that sort of mindset before you go into an interview. To everything from sort of breathing techniques before your interview. Like, I still like to do that myself before big presentations. Sort of the in for four, hold for four, and out for four box breathing. So yeah, it's everything sort of that's going through the mind of someone who is neurodivergent during that interview process, and it's how to overcome that. Like eye contact, for example. I actually find eye contact quite challenging sometimes. I get very conscious of it when I'm in a one-on-one situation. But one of the techniques in the platform is to look at the bridge of someone's nose, and it looks like you're looking directly at them. And I've had people sort of users come back to me and say, I've used that technique and it's absolutely brilliant. Like, I look like I'm looking directly at them. And also to be conscious of like things like body language, and sitting like your interviewer is sitting, and not to be sort of fidgeting with anything, that sort of thing. All these things that do get picked up in an interview subconsciously, I think. So yeah, so it's around those specifics and those behaviors, that someone who is neurodivergent has.
And then, taking them through that process. I mean, even for people that aren't neurodivergent, that is a stressful process, right? So you don't get certain jobs, you don't get certain interviews, and this, I guess, is where you show that kind of leadership role, because you're helping these people to achieve their goals, How do you deal with, you know, the knockbacks that will come of a job search anyway? You know, how do you deal with that? Because I guess they're relying on you more.
Yeah, like that's one of our taglines is kind of confidence is key. And you're right, no matter who you are, if you're neurodivergent or not, if you keep getting knocked back, like we're all human, right? It starts to affect you, and that actually starts to affect your body language and your tone of voice. And you carry that into your interviews. Um, so it's really about sort of dusting yourself off, and going again. And that's really difficult because, it's happened to me quite a bit in my career where I've gone for roles and I've thought I've got it. And unfortunately, it's a no, and you're waiting for 3 weeks, and the disappointment, it just really does affect you, and it affects your confidence. So I think that the better you are at the skills for interviews, the more confident you'll be. And I suppose the platform is great for that because I found when I was working directly with job seekers, it was great me teaching them all these skills at that very point in time. But in 3 months' time, they'd just forgotten everything, and they've probably been, rejected from 3 or 4 roles at that point. So you can always go back to the training again to refresh. Um, so yeah, just to mention as well, we actually have a platform that caters for anyone who's not neurodivergent as well. So it's a sort of a flagship platform. But yeah, it's just, you're right. It really does affect confidence, and you kind of start to ask yourself, even second guess yourself, going, is this the right thing in my career to be doing, etc. Because I keep getting rejected. I would say actually a really great tip for anyone who's working or looking for a job is to find a job seeking buddy. So someone who is in the same situation, maybe looking for any type of role, whatever it is, and support each other, like meet each other for coffee, share war stories, because that is great for your mental health and feeling better about yourself. Because at that point, you think you're the only person that's been rejected for a role ever, you know. And I've been in that situation myself before. But if you get someone in the same situation, it's amazing how better that you'll make each other feel. So yeah, that's my top tip.
And do you think that, if you think about URhired, and obviously it's interesting that you have the platforms open to all, because it is tricky to find a job. And I think, you come from that recruitment industry background, where I see recruitment, as I've said when we started this conversation, is very much around kind of revenue and highlighting and finding the people that perfectly match. So do you felt like to set yourself up as a leader of the business, you almost had to kind of remove yourself from that traditional model? Like it was maybe you had that idea before, but it was be very difficult to roll out in capital, or you've seen like things being rolled out in the companies you've worked for, but it's always been a bit of a kind of an add-on. Whereas if you're fully focused on it and that's what you do, then you can make it happen more. I mean, that's how I see it. I don't know if that was the kind of thinking behind it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, so I suppose from my recruitment experience, I always thought that I suppose the better recruitment company there is, the better they prepare their candidates. And what
Yep,
I mean
that's
by
true.
that
Yep.
is, the emails that go across with the prep email that, potential questions that come up, etc. Right. So I think when you work with a recruiter, if they know their client really well, they've been out of the office, they know the culture of the business, they know the lines of progression in the business, they've met the hiring manager. That's it. That's a company to hold on to, right? That's a recruitment business that's consultative, and it's not sort of, fully and only focused on how much money they're going to get out of placing the candidate, right? And they've actually got their candidate's career in mind, and understand that this is a good step for this candidate, not just a step to get into a job, for the sake of getting into a job. So yeah, I found that probably through my own career when I was in agency recruitment, that I struggled myself to, I suppose, prepare each candidate, and didn't really. I had a small amount of time to do that, and I did as best as I could. But what I can do now is I can only focus on that. So I don't do the recruitment piece itself, but I do every tool in the box that person needs to get the job that they want or deserve. And then from the client's or the company perspective, every tool in the box that the business needs to hire the right staff. So I always loved that part of recruitment, the preparation piece. Um, and I would go above and beyond and make sure that the candidate had every piece of information that I could possibly give them about the hiring manager, about lines of progression, about the business itself, about the maturity of the business, etc. So yeah, that's what makes a good recruiter, right? Someone who really knows their client inside out. Um, but and that automatically, if you prepare a candidate really well, you're giving them the confidence, because they're going into that interview going, right, well, David gave me this, this, and this. I know this about the hiring manager. I know this. I can show them in the interview. I've got good questions to ask. That gives them confidence, and the amount of offers that company will get will increase, I believe, because you're preparing the candidates in the best way. So yeah, prep is key.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting what you said there about like kind of the good recruiters, and that the interview prep, I think, is so important. And it must be so beneficial for people that are kind of working with URhired, both on the client and the candidate side, to have that preparation, because people that you talk about communication with confidence, with intent, people going into that interview having that prep, from someone that's really focused on actually prepping you. I can see that being really, really useful for anyone, really. It's like that is such a great kind of business model as well to do.
I think it's about an interview strategy, David. So, that's when I speak to a person who is sort of the confidence has dipped. They've been rejected 3 or 4 times. The last thing they want to do is another interview. That's where I kind of say to them, well, what have you been doing about getting a job? I applied to 50 roles and I got one interview. Like, that's not a strategy, right? So they need to understand how to tailor their CV, the LinkedIn profile, to approach the types of companies that they want to join, they actually want to join, in the culture that business has as well. And have an actual focus and a whole strategy there. So I think that gets left out quite a bit, and confidence starts to dip then as well when you are applying to so many roles and you're not getting the interviews you want. So yeah, the strategy is the word there, I think.
Do you know what my top tip of interview, whenever I give someone an interview, I go to with client meetings, is I always say, if someone asks you, what drink would you like a drink? I always say yes, and say, I'd like a black coffee, please. So I feel that black coffee is the perfect drink to ask for. One, it makes you look like you're quite serious, and you're quite a solid guy, even if you don't like black coffee.
Yeah.
Also, it's quite simple. You're not like, can I have some milk and sugar and that sort of thing. And also, it'll probably keep you like alert during the interview, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I always say, would you like? I have a black coffee, please. And then, but it's just a silly quip that I do. But I've always, I think someone told me that at one point, maybe in 2002. I was like, yeah, I like that little tip. So yeah, it was a good one.
The actual top tip I always give to my candidate, to anyone who's sort of asked me what my top tip will be, is when it comes to the question time in an interview.
Yeah.
A lot of candidates think, oh, this is the end of the interview, great, to kind of sit back and relax. But actually, that's a point where I tell them to ask a question. And if I had one question in an interview, it will be this. So what is the main challenge for this person coming to this role?
Yeah.
And the reason why you ask that is because you sell back on the answer. So they tell you, well, the main challenge in this role, David, will be that you need to build strategic relationships with the HR team and the leadership team around you. Well, it's funny you say that, Mr. or Mrs. Interviewer. That's exactly what I did in my last job.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's also at the end of the interview as well. So you're like, you leave on a really good point, and you're still selling. And the amount of feedback I get from that is like, I've never had a negative feedback from it. It's all positive. So yeah, so that's my tip as well. I love your black coffee one. I'm going to rob that as well.
Yeah, that's right. As you're not kind of caffeine allergic or whatever, set yourself something. But yeah, I genuinely think. I mean, obviously, as recruiters, we're always thinking about the best way to get those interviews, and I hate it when people come to the end of an interview, and when you say, I always say, have you got any questions for me? Sometimes I'll take the half of the interview, they keep giving me more questions because I'm just interested. I always think recruiters are inquisitive people.
Yeah.
So if you've run out of questions, you're probably not a recruiter.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
yeah, when someone says at the end of the interview, no, I think we've covered everything, or so and so said it in the previous interview, so I'm fine. That's a killer. That's a killer for me. That's like,
Yeah.
how can you're talking to the person that's going to make a decision for you? Don't look like you don't know what don't
Exactly.
care, And I think it's so important. I think where you're coming from in terms of how we set these meetings up, and I know obviously shout out to yourself because I know you have your podcast which is called Interview Expert, where I'm assuming you go and delve into detail of this type of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for mentioning that as well. So the Interview Expert, it's about 14 episodes. So essentially I interview experts, and they range from recruiters to learning and development leaders to professional rugby players, talking about mental health during an interview process. So there's a lot of tips for not just candidates but also hiring managers as well, on how to interview and ask the right questions. Yeah, so you can go wherever you get your podcast, but it's it's a great thing to do. I love doing it because I love talking about recruitment, having 13 years experience in it. So yeah, so that's what the podcast does.
And do you generally think, as you're kind of moving into this, that thinking about this community, that you can improve those outcomes really by prepping companies and candidates better? It will enable like better outcomes, better decisions to be made for teams, for candidates.
I think you just summed up the business there, David, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't really change anything about what you said there. There is, like, I've worked in these companies, right, where diversity, inclusion is talked about. When I get into the companies themselves, whether they sort of actually act on that, I don't know. I think there's a lot to be done around awareness of, not just hiring neurodivergent staff, but actually managing them as well. And I know there's a couple of companies out there that do that, but we need more of that. And I think it just starts with education to the hiring team on what does neurodivergence mean. What are the conditions? What are the behaviors? How someone that is hyper focused can be amazing in a job, a particular job. Not every job. Not every job you don't need to make eye contact or build relationships with people. If you're a coder and you're brilliant at that, and you're kind of sitting at your laptop and you're doing your job to the best of your ability, why do you really need to build a relationship with someone down at the water cooler? That's the kind of education we need, because as I said, that stat, 85% in the UK and Ireland, it's absolutely massive. So there was a program on over here in Ireland a couple of weeks ago called The Assembly, and it was a group of neurodivergent individuals who interviewed our Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, and that stat came up 3 times. And I suppose the context of the show was you can ask the Taoiseach, Prime Minister in the UK, any question you want, and they grilled him on it because nothing's really been done about it. So I would hope that URhired, has done that to a small degree. The dream is to scale it, go into different countries like the US, and do it on a bigger scale. But yeah, long way to go.
Yeah, well, we'll obviously we're partnering with yourselves, so hopefully we can help you alongside that journey. 'Cause it's something that GCS feels very strongly about as well.
Absolutely.
Quick questions then. We come on to the client side. Would you say that a face-to-face interview or a video interview is better for a neurodivergent person? Which one works better?
Yeah, like I always say to anyone, whether they're neurodivergent or not, a face-to-face, if you the opportunity of a face-to-face, always take it. In a world where we communicate via text and video calls, I still believe that face-to-face has far bigger impact. And when it does come down to a decision at the offer stage, where the offer is between you and another candidate, and you came into the office, you took the time to get on the train and come into London or Dublin or wherever, have seen the office and actually met the person face to face, and the other candidate hasn't, you will 100% get the role. It is, and I think that's great to see, but I also see it from the hiring manager's perspective as well. And I see a trend also where, like, I'm working with someone and they're telling me they're interviewing at X business, and the hiring manager is like in Dublin, and the candidate is 200 yards down the line, or down the road, and they're on VC to each other. Just makes no sense for me. There's a bit of a laziness from the hiring manager's perspective there as well. So yeah, I face to face will always win. I actually say that myself in business, in my company itself. It's like I always take the attitude: how can you work with someone that you've never met before? And actually, GCS are a great example of that, because when I spoke to Andrew, we said, look, let's meet. He came into Dogpatch Labs where I'm based, and then I came down, met the team, did a presentation in front of the team. We got a photo together and everything. And that's it. That's a great relationship to have, because we met each other. We understand who we are. We've actually met physically. So yeah, that will be a tip for anyone, for the hiring manager to definitely at least once meet the candidate face to face during the interview process, and for the candidate to meet the hiring manager at least once during the interview process.
And when you speak to clients as well, when you're talking about, we mentioned obviously with the candidates, you think is best maybe not to say straight away, I am ADHD or whatever. Do you feel it's important for clients to be quite upfront that we will consider people from all backgrounds, to actually plan their interviews, even if they don't know that any of the people are neurodivergent, but to kind of start to take this into account, even if none of the people they're actually interviewing are neurodivergent?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, why not? Hardly any companies do this. Like, there are definitely absolutely companies that do this, and their job specs are use kind of open language, and they appeal to male and female, and they make accommodations during the interview process, etc. But yeah, why not? Like, even if you're not a neurodivergent and you're reading that email, you're like, well, this business is clearly inclusive. It sounds like a great place to work, and we're also touching then on having a better candidate experience compared to your competitor. So a company that does and says what you just said there, and makes these accommodations and use that type of language and has those type of job specs, etc., and creates that really good candidate experience, you're the company that's going to be the employer of choice when it comes to the candidate coming down to offer stage, and they have an offer with you and an offer with someone else. You'll get them, because when you are a candidate, the only way you can make a decision on a company is from that candidate experience. And the better it is, the better your talent gets. And that's small things like making sure you are meeting face to face, as I said, going for a casual coffee at the end, getting them in to see the team, bring them out for a drink, whatever it is. Um, those little things go so far. And if you interview someone and the body language is off and you're not making eye contact with them and you're creating a bad experience, they're not going to accept an offer if you give it to them at the end of the process. They'll choose someone else because they weren't treated the way they should be treated. So, candidate experience. I used to, in the companies that I worked with, we had a score for candidate experience, and we used to send out surveys to the candidates afterwards to make sure that we are focused on creating the best one possible. So all of that is going to result in you hiring better talent.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm interviewing people, I generally tend to do quite a lot of interviews. I quite like to do like the first interviews because I work quite closely with the talent team. And I think that one of the things I always find is that the CEO comes on and then people get quite nervous.
Mm.
And I struggle myself with like, just relax. Like I'm a normal human being. I know that I've got this job as the job title more than anything. They don't know me from Adam, right? But it's just CEO. Straight away you see CEO and it freaks you out, doesn't it? Most people, I find. So I have to almost like sometimes like calm. I feel like I have to calm people down myself. And I guess I'm partly doing this to kind of be more inclusive in my hiring. Just to say, look, it's fine. This is quite an informal conversation. Did you see that people get kind of like disturbed by job title, particularly the
Yeah.
higher level it goes?
Yeah, I think I'm not too sure how much I believe in panel interviews. So you could have someone interviewing a candidate, and you have, as you said, a CEO in the room, and then someone more junior. And the person that's more junior will probably just agree with the CEO because they're the CEO, right? So I think having an individual one-on-one interview with someone throughout the process. So there's 3 rounds, but there's 3 separate interviewers. I think, and then the feedback isn't shared until a sync at the end between the hiring managers. I think that's the way you'll really get the proper feedback. I did that myself when I started the business. I got a group of job seekers into a room, and I asked them specific questions, and I started to realize that they were just agreeing with the person that talked first, and I wasn't really finding out what everyone's actual thoughts were in the room. So I also think from a candidate perspective, it's difficult. You're going into an interview with a panel of 3 people. It's hard to know who to make eye contact with, who to speak to when you're actually delivering answers. It makes it more nerve-wracking as well. Now, in some cases, the business maybe want to see how you will be in front of an audience, which is fine, and that works. But maybe for the more sort of junior roles, I think one-on-one is suffices. So yeah.
Okay. And my last kind of question, obviously, thinking about the kind of future and about the business itself. You've been running this as a solopreneur, and obviously gaining great traction and building up a reputation for yourself and your own brand, Owen, which I think is really important in this day and age. How is that? Of the leaders listening, thinking, who needs all the rest of the people around me? I just could do it myself. How is it as a solopreneur? Because obviously you worked in big teams for big corporates, Accenture, TikTok, Facebook, and now it's you. So how do you find that yourself?
What a great question. Yeah. So I didn't think, I suppose if I go back to myself 3 years ago, and I was able to talk to myself 3 years ago, I would probably say there's a shed load of work ahead of you, more than you've ever done in your life. Um, And starting a business is, as I said, I think at the beginning of the podcast, it's the hardest thing I've done, um, versus rearing children.
Well,
Um,
it's like having another child, isn't it? Your own
it
business is
is.
like
It is
having a
actually.
child.
That's exactly the way. I had a actual guy from a recruitment business I used to work with, Argyle Scott, who said that to me before. He was like, "I have two human children, but I have three kids, including my business." So it really is. I myself, when I look back at my career, maybe I wasn't being my authentic self in those companies that I was working in, if I'm being entirely honest with myself. So I've definitely come out of my shell a lot since I've started the business. Um, I think it's not something that you can easily sort of make money from straight away. It takes time. And if you're in a job paying X amount, you have that coming in every month. But when you're starting a business, 1 month is better than the other. And you have to be able to deal with those highs and lows. I'd say the highs are unbelievable. Like when something, even the GCS partnership, that was a huge high for our business. Um, but there's less highs than there are lows. So like one day you feel like you're this kind of CEO with the chest out, and then the next minute you're like, the next day you're like, what am I doing? So yeah, I would go in with your eyes open. I think definitely grow your network of entrepreneurs and meet them and understand what it's like to actually start a business and grow a business. It becomes part of your life, but I myself don't ever want to go back to a corporate job. I love this so much, and the network that it's opened. And in Ireland, we have a lot of support around being an entrepreneur and growing your business, especially with Enterprise Ireland. So yeah, it's a roller coaster. It's brilliant, but it's terrible. Uh, um, and yeah, I suppose when I started, I was like 38, maybe 39. And I said, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So yeah, uh, love it. But if you ever want to do it, go in with your eyes open.
Totally. And like one question I always ask with kind of people like yourself is like, as you plan, I assume you do, to hire and that sort of thing, will you be using your own, will you try to create as diverse a workforce as possible and use the things that you've been training people to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing interviews recently, and I suppose I preach about all these things, so I make sure that I do it in practice. So and then I speak with the candidates afterwards, whether they accept the job or not, and just ask them what they thought of the process. Um, you
Because I guess it's
know,
a good learning thing for you as well. Actually doing it kind of live, experimenting is the wrong word, but you can see what works and what doesn't work in
yeah,
reality.
yeah, absolutely, and I can feed that back to my clients as well. Um, and like, I suppose your customer, your candidate, they are king. Like and always listen to them. Like if they have a pain point, that you've never thought of before, make sure to solve it for them. Because since I've grown the business, sitting with a customer face to face, or a candidate even, and asking for that feedback, but the constructive feedback, not the positive, is how your business will grow, and how you will beat your competitors, because you actually listen to your customers. Just because you have an idea in your head of how a candidate experience should go, or how a a customer's experience should be, is not, you know realistically, it's probably not the way that they want that experience to be. So listen to them, and what they say is gold. And always listen to them face to face, one on one.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, I mean, what's next then? What's next in the next for 2026? What's happening for You Are Hired?
we're going to go the GCS partnership. That's top of mind. um, yeah, like we want to. So we're working on something to help actually the community over in the UK at the moment. So underprivileged communities that maybe don't have access to something like my platform. We're also looking to work with US universities, quite big universities in the States, and then work with companies as well in Ireland and the UK and the States as well to grow talent spectrum. So I am hiring over the next sort of 6 months, and we're looking for a product manager to come in and sort of tailor our product and make sure that we're delivering what our customers want. So yes, that's sort of short to medium term. Long term, we'll look for angel investment, VC investment eventually, and then I'll retire to a beach in the Bahamas, David, and that's the plan.
Good. Well, yeah, hopefully we'll get that done by 2027. That'd be
Yeah,
brilliant.
absolutely. Yeah, why not?
I mean, it's a real pleasure to kind of be partnered with URhired and to get you on the podcast. It's been a great conversation. I do wish you well, because obviously
Thank
I
you.
think one, it sounds like a really interesting business, and secondly, you're doing really, really good things. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, obviously we'll put the links in there. And I know that you're always interested in speaking to people, talking to people, and setting up new partnerships. So yeah, please reach out to Owen if you're interested, or reach out to GCS and we can put you in touch with Owen. So yes, thank you very much. Owen, have a great day and enjoy the sunshine. And
Thank you,
we
David.
will speak soon, I'm sure.
A pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you.